Welcome to another deep dive. Today, we're going behind the scenes of a company you probably interact with every day, whether you realize it or not. It's Mondelez International.
Mondelez, huh? Yeah. They're the snacking giant behind some of the most iconic brands. You know, those go-to treats that just magically appear in your pantry.
I'm talking Oreos, Cadbury, Ritz.
Oh, yeah, those are the big ones. But they've got a whole portfolio of brands that you probably don't even realize they own.
Well, to really understand this snacking empire, we're going to be taking a deep dive into their 2023 annual report, their Form 10K. This document, it's not just about, financial figures. It's a window into how they operate, their strategy, their challenges, and how they're trying to be a leader in this whole concept of sustainable snacking.
That's the thing that really jumps out at you when you start reading these reports. It's not just about, maximizing profits. There's this growing awareness of their impact on the world, on consumers, and they're trying to balance that global reach with a commitment to sustainable practices. It's a fascinating balancing act.
It really is. And just to give our listeners a sense of the scale of this operation, Mondelez has 91,000 employees. They operate in 80 countries. They have 148 manufacturing facilities. And in 2023, they brought in $36 billion.
Billion. With a B.
Dollars in revenue. It's mind-boggling.
You start to understand why they're classified as a force, a large accelerated filer by the SEC. Basically, they're under a microscope because of their massive impact on the market. They've kind of been called up to the major leagues.
Yeah.
And that comes with more scrutiny, stricter rules, and, that's something that you as a consumer should be aware of.
It's definitely worth paying attention to. Now, beyond those impressive numbers, the report also outlines Mondelez's 4 strategic priorities. You could say it's their roadmap for continued success in the snacking world. They've even given them a catchy name. They call them the 4 pillars of snacking domination.
Snacking domination. I love it. They're not messing around, are they?
Clearly not. So let's break down these pillars. What's the first one all about?
Well, it all starts with the consumer, of course. Their first pillar is accelerating consumer-centric growth, which basically means they're doubling down on those categories we all know and love: chocolate, biscuits, baked snacks.
The classics.
But it also means expanding into new markets and finding innovative ways to reach consumers. They're not just sticking to what they know. They're constantly looking for new opportunities to grow.
So world domination, one delicious snack at a time.
Well, global domination might be putting it dramatically. But they're certainly aiming for a strong presence in key markets worldwide. And that brings us to their second pillar, which focuses on driving operational excellence.
So it's not just about creating delicious snacks. It's about making sure they can produce and deliver them efficiently and effectively on a global scale.
Exactly. It's about optimizing every step of the process, from sourcing ingredients to manufacturing to distribution, all the way to how they spend their marketing dollars. They have to be smart about how they operate to maintain those profit margins and keep those snacks coming.
It's a massive undertaking, and it requires a lot of coordination and expertise across their global operations. Now, their third pillar highlights something that's often overlooked in these kinds of reports: the importance of their people. It's called creating a winning growth culture.
Yeah, this is where things get really interesting. They're talking about attracting and retaining top talent, fostering a culture of innovation, creating a positive work environment. It's a recognition that their employees are their most valuable asset, and that investing in their well-being is crucial to their success.
It's about more than just profits and numbers. It's about creating a company culture that empowers employees and fosters a sense of purpose.
Exactly. And that brings us to their fourth pillar. This is the one that I think is the most challenging and most exciting: scaling sustainable snacking.
This is where the balancing act we talked about earlier really comes into play. How do you reconcile this massive global footprint with a commitment to sustainable practices? That's a question we're going to be exploring in depth throughout this deep dive.
It's the question that's on everyone's mind these days. Can a company this big, with operations all over the world, really make a meaningful commitment to sustainability?
Well, their report outlines some concrete steps they're taking. They're focused on sustainably sourcing ingredients like cocoa and wheat, reducing their environmental impact across all their operations.
They're even offering more mindful snacking options, recognizing that consumers are increasingly looking for healthier choices.
So it's not just about reducing their footprint. It's about offering products that align with those evolving consumer values.
Exactly. It's a holistic approach. And it'll be interesting to see how they measure their progress and what kind of impact these initiatives have on the company, on the industry, and ultimately on the world.
Okay, so we've got a good overview of their 4 pillars. But now I want to get into the nitty-gritty. I want to know what's happening behind the scenes to bring those snacks to life. I'm talking about their operations, their sourcing, their innovation.
Let's lift the curtain and take a peek behind those factory doors.
Yeah.
Shall we?
Let's do it. First up, let's talk about their sourcing. We've already touched on this, but I want to really emphasize the sheer scale of their procurement operation. Think about the volume of raw materials they need. Cocoa, dairy, wheat, sugar. It's astronomical.
It's mind-boggling.
Yeah.
And managing that global procurement network, ensuring those ingredients are sourced ethically and sustainably, it's a massive undertaking.
It's a huge responsibility, and it's something they're taking very seriously. They've implemented various programs and partnerships to promote sustainable farming practices, improve the livelihoods of farmers, and ensure the quality and traceability of those key ingredients.
It's about creating a more transparent and equitable supply chain from the farm all the way to that finished product.
Exactly. But sourcing those ingredients is just the first step. Then comes the magic of transforming those raw materials into those iconic snacks we all know and love, and that's where their manufacturing facilities come in.
Those factories are like well-oiled machines churning out those snacks 24/7.
It's a marvel of modern engineering and logistics.
It is. And they're constantly working to improve efficiency, reduce waste, and minimize their environmental impact.
Right. We've talked about their sustainability initiatives, and those efforts are woven into every aspect of their operations, from sourcing those ingredients to the manufacturing process to how those products are packaged and shipped.
And let's not forget about the innovation side of things. They can't just rely on those classic favorites forever. They have to keep coming up with new snack ideas to tempt our taste buds.
It's a competitive market out there, and those snack shelves are constantly evolving. So how does Mondelez stay ahead of those trends and keep those innovative snacks coming?
Well, that's where those global technical centers we mentioned earlier come in. They're like the Willy Wonka factories of the 21st century. But instead of just chocolate, they're working on everything from new Oreo flavors to healthier snacking options, exploring new ingredients, textures, and formats.
It's like a playground for food scientists and snack enthusiasts.
It is. And they're constantly experimenting, pushing boundaries, and trying to anticipate those future snack cravings. They're even using data analytics and consumer insights to understand those emerging trends and develop products that meet those evolving needs.
So it's a combination of creativity, scientific expertise, and a deep understanding of the consumer.
Exactly. And they're not afraid to take risks, to try new things and see what sticks. After all, some of the most iconic snacks were once considered crazy ideas.
Okay, so we've covered the sourcing, the manufacturing, and the innovation. But let's be realistic, every company faces challenges, and Mondelez is no exception. In fact, their report dedicates a significant portion to outlining the risks they must navigate.
Right, and some of these risks are pretty substantial. For example, they're currently under investigation by the European Commission for potentially violating antitrust laws. This could result in some hefty fines and impact how they operate in that market.
Yikes. Talk about a potential financial hit. And it's a big deal for a company that prides itself on operating ethically and responsibly. What exactly are the accusations?
Well, the Commission is investigating whether Mondelez has been engaging in anti-competitive practices, such as restricting the cross-border sales of their products within the European Union.
So it's about ensuring a fair and competitive market for snacks in Europe.
Exactly. The investigation is ongoing and the outcome is uncertain, but it's definitely something that investors and consumers are watching closely.
Okay, so that's a pretty big one. What other risks are they facing?
Well, supply chain disruptions are a major concern. We've seen how fragile those global supply chains can be in recent years. Pandemics, extreme weather events, geopolitical instability, these can all disrupt those intricate networks, impacting everything from the availability and price of those key ingredients to the ability to get those finished products to consumers.
We saw it firsthand during the pandemic. Those empty supermarket shelves were a stark reminder of how interconnected our world is and how even a snacking giant isn't immune to those disruptions.
Absolutely. And they also highlight cybersecurity threats as a significant risk. Remember that NotPetya malware incident back in 2017? It crippled businesses worldwide, and Mondelez wasn't spared. They even mentioned it in the report as a cautionary tale. emphasizing how they've had to up their game when it comes to cybersecurity.
It's a good reminder that even something as seemingly simple as a snack can be vulnerable in today's digital world. So what are they doing to mitigate those cybersecurity risks? They must have learned from that 2017 incident.
They have. They've invested heavily in strengthening their cyber defenses, implementing new protocols, and training their employees to be more vigilant about those threats. It's an ongoing effort, and it's something they're taking very seriously, given the sensitive nature of their data and the potential disruption a cyber attack could cause.
Right, because a cyber attack could disrupt their entire operation, from their manufacturing facilities to their distribution networks to their communication systems.
Exactly. And it's not just about protecting their own systems. It's about protecting the data of their partners, their suppliers, and their consumers.
So it's a multi-layered approach, and it requires a lot of coordination and expertise.
Absolutely. It's a constant battle to stay ahead of those cyber criminals, but they're definitely taking the necessary steps to protect themselves and their stakeholders.
Okay, so we've got antitrust investigations, supply chain disruptions, and cybersecurity threats. What else is on their risk radar?
Well, they also highlight the importance of attracting and retaining top talent. In today's competitive job market, finding and keeping those skilled workers, especially in areas like technology, data analytics, and sustainability, is a major challenge.
Those are the fields that are going to be crucial for Mondelez's future success, so they need to be competitive in terms of compensation, benefits, and work environment to attract those top performers.
Exactly. It's not just about snacks anymore. It's about creating a workplace that inspires people to do their best work and feel valued for their contributions.
And that means addressing those concerns about work-life balance, professional development opportunities, and a company culture that aligns with those evolving values.
Absolutely. They even mentioned in the report the strikes they faced in some of their U.S. facilities back in 2021. That was a wake-up call, highlighting the importance of strong labor relations and employee satisfaction.
It's a reminder that even a company as big and successful as Mondelez needs to pay attention to the needs and concerns of its workforce.
Right. And those needs are constantly evolving. So they have to stay engaged in those conversations, be willing to listen, and adapt to those changing expectations.
Okay, so we've covered those risk factors, but let's not forget why we're here. It's about those iconic snacks, the brands that have become part of our everyday lives. But in today's world, it's not enough to just produce a tasty treat. Consumers are demanding more from the companies they support, and Mondelez knows their brands are only as strong as the trust consumers place in them.
That's right. They dedicate a portion of their report to brand building and reputation management, acknowledging the need to adapt to changing consumer preferences and address concerns about well-being, ethical sourcing, and environmental impact.
So it's about more than just selling snacks. It's about building a brand that aligns with consumers' values.
Precisely. They know that negative publicity can spread quickly in today's digital world, and they're being proactive in addressing those concerns and showcasing their efforts to be a responsible corporate citizen.
And that means being transparent about their operations, engaging in open communication with consumers, and being accountable for their actions.
Absolutely. They understand that consumers are more informed and empowered than ever before, and they're making choices based on those factors, not just on taste or price.
So it's a whole new ballgame for the snacking industry. It's not just about creating delicious snacks anymore. It's about creating a brand that stands for something, a brand that consumers can trust and feel good about supporting.
And that's the challenge and the opportunity for Mondelez.
Well, this is a lot to think about. We've gone from billions in revenue to the delicate balance between global growth and sustainable practices, and we've only just scratched the surface of their annual report.
There's definitely a lot more to unpack, especially when it comes to their financial performance and those specific sustainability initiatives they're pursuing.
Stay tuned, because in the next part of our deep dive, we're going to crunch some numbers, get into the nitty-gritty of their financial performance, and then we'll really dig into how they're trying to make this snacking empire more sustainable.
All right, let's grab those calculators and dive into those financials.
You know I love a good financial mystery, so what jumped out at you when you were crunching those numbers?
Well, their net revenue for 2023 hit a whopping $36 billion, a 14.4% increase from the previous year. But before we break out the celebratory Oreos,
Oh, I'm always up for celebrating with Oreos.
we need to look a little deeper, remember. Their focus on organic net revenue, that's the figure that strips away the impact of acquisitions and currency fluctuations to reveal the true growth of their core business.
Right, it's like peeling back the layers of a Cadbury caramel bar to get to that creamy, delicious center. So how did that organic revenue perform?
It actually grew by an impressive 14.7%, reaching a total of $35.57 billion. That's a pretty clear indication that their core brands are resonating with consumers, even amidst all the economic uncertainties and shifting consumer preferences we've been discussing.
Yeah, definitely something to celebrate. But I have a feeling those celebrations might be a little muted when we look at their operating income. We touched on this earlier, but remind us, how did that figure fare in 2023?
Yeah, their operating income actually took a hit, declining by 24% compared to the previous year. That's a significant drop.
Yeah.
And it's largely attributed to those supply chain disruptions we've been talking about, along with increased input costs and, that legal matter with the European Commission.
Ah, yes, those pesky global forces and legal hurdles. It's a reminder that even a snacking giant isn't immune to the economic realities of the world.
Exactly. And let's not forget about the integration of recent acquisitions, particularly Cliff Bar, which they acquired in 2022. Merging businesses and realizing those expected synergies takes time and can impact profitability in the short term.
So while their revenue growth is impressive, their profitability is facing some headwinds. But as any seasoned investor knows, it's important to look beyond the top-level numbers and understand the nuances of their performance.
Absolutely. For example, their strategic pricing initiatives. Those carefully calculated price increases they've implemented in certain markets have helped to offset some of those rising input costs.
It makes sense. If the price of cocoa goes up, your chocolate bar is going to cost a bit more, right?
Right, exactly.
All right.
But it's not just about raising prices. They've also achieved volume growth in key markets, which means they're selling more snacks.
That's always a good sign. Where are they seeing this increased demand?
Emerging markets, particularly Latin America and the Asia-Pacific region, are driving a lot of this volume growth.
So the world is developing a taste for Mondelez snacks. That bodes well for their long-term growth prospects.
It does. Those emerging markets represent a huge opportunity for Mondelez, and they're strategically investing in those regions to build their brand presence and cater to those growing consumer bases.
Okay, so we've got a sense of their overall financial picture, but let's zoom in on their performance in different regions. Their report breaks down their operations into 4 segments: Latin America, Asia, Middle East, and Africa, or AMEA for short, Europe, and North America. Each region presents its own unique opportunities and challenges.
Sounds like we've got a world tour of snacking ahead of us.
Let's start with Latin America, which seems to be a real sweet spot for Mondelez right now.
It is. Their net revenue in Latin America soared by an impressive 37.9% in 2023, fueled by a combination of price increases, volume growth, and the acquisition of the Mexican confectionery company Ricolino.
Wow, that's some serious growth. It sounds like Latin American consumers have a growing appetite for those Mondelez treats.
They do, and Mondelez is capitalizing on that demand by expanding their product portfolio, introducing new flavors tailored to local preferences, and even launching those better-for-you options to cater to those seeking healthier choices.
It's like they're conducting a delicious experiment, observing how different flavors and products resonate with various cultural palates.
Fascinating.
Now, what about AMEA? That's a vast region with incredibly diverse cultures and economic conditions. How is Mondelez approaching that market?
AMEA is definitely a complex landscape, and Mondelez recognizes that a one-size-fits-all approach won't work there. They're focusing on building their presence in key markets, like India, China, and Southeast Asia. And they're adapting their product offerings to local tastes and preferences.
I've heard they've even introduced Oreo flavors, specifically for the Indian market, like cardamom and rose. Talk about thinking outside the traditional cookie jar.
Exactly. It's about understanding those nuanced cultural preferences and finding ways to make those global brands feel locally relevant. They're also investing heavily in their distribution networks in AMEA, expanding their reach into those rural areas and smaller cities, where those snacks might not have been readily available before.
It's all about making those connections, bringing those beloved snacks to new consumers, and expanding their global footprint. So how did those efforts translate into financial results in AMEA?
Their net revenue in AME grew by 18.2% in 2023, driven mainly by volume growth. Biscuits, chocolate, and powdered beverages are proving to be particularly popular in that region.
While the growth may not be as explosive as in Latin America, it's still a positive sign, demonstrating their commitment to building a strong presence in those emerging markets. Okay, let's shift our focus to Europe, a region that's both familiar and challenging for Mondelez.
You're right, Europe is a mature market with established competitors and discerning consumers who are quite aware of those ethical and sustainability considerations we discussed earlier. Plus, as we mentioned, there's that ongoing European Commission investigation, adding another layer of complexity.
Right. So how do they navigate those choppy European waters in 2023?
Their net revenue in Europe grew by a modest 5.7% in 2023, mainly driven by price increases. They've had to be strategic with their pricing in Europe, finding that delicate balance between offsetting those rising costs and maintaining a competitive edge in a market where consumers have plenty of options.
It's a tightrope walk, for sure. Too high a price, and consumers will switch to a competitor. Too low, and your profit margins suffer. So what else are they doing to stay relevant in this mature market?
They're investing in innovation, introducing new products and flavors tailored to those European palates. They're also ramping up their digital capabilities, expanding their e-commerce presence, and using data analytics to better understand those European consumer behaviors.
It's about staying nimble and responsive in a market that's constantly evolving.
Okay, finally, let's talk about North America, their home turf and their largest market. They've got a dominant position here. But as we've discussed, the competition is fierce, and those consumer preferences are always shifting. Absolutely. North America is a key battleground in the snack wars. And Mondelez knows they can't take their success for granted. They've got to stay on top of those trends and keep innovating to maintain their leadership position.
So how are those North American snack battles playing out in terms of their financial performance?
Their net revenue in North America grew by a healthy 10.9% in 2023, driven by both price increases and volume growth. Their core brands, Oreo, Ritz, Cadbury, are still going strong. But they're also making progress in expanding their portfolio of better-for-you options to cater to those health-conscious consumers.
Right, those Oreo Thins and Belvita breakfast biscuits are prime examples of how they're adapting to those evolving demands.
Exactly. It's about offering those familiar flavors with a healthier twist. And they're also focusing on convenience and portability to appeal to those busy, on-the-go lifestyles.
Think individually wrapped snacks, mini packs of cookies, and those breakfast bars you can grab and go. It's all about catering to those modern snacking habits.
And let's not forget their efforts to enhance operational efficiency in North America. They're streamlining their manufacturing and distribution processes, optimizing their marketing spend, and leveraging data analytics to gain a deeper understanding of those North American consumer behaviors.
It's about working smarter, not harder, doing more with less, as they say.
Precisely. And those efficiency gains free up resources to invest in those key areas we've been discussing. Innovation, sustainability, and making sure those beloved brands stay fresh and relevant.
Okay, so we've taken a whirlwind tour of their financial performance across the globe.
Yeah.
What's your overall assessment? Are they on track to achieve that snacking domination they're aiming for?
Well, the operating income decline raises some flags, but their overall revenue growth, particularly that organic net revenue, is a positive sign. They're clearly doing something right in terms of managing their brand portfolio, adapting their products, and expanding their reach into those crucial emerging markets.
It sounds like they're striking a balance between celebrating their successes and acknowledging those areas where they need to course correct.
Exactly. But beyond those numbers, what's really intriguing is how they're approaching the broader questions of sustainability and social responsibility. These topics are becoming increasingly important to consumers and investors alike, and Mondelez seems to be taking them seriously.
Right, and we touched on their Snacking Made Right initiative earlier, but I'm eager to dig into the specifics. What concrete steps are they taking to make their snacking empire more sustainable and socially responsible?
That's where things get really interesting. They've set some ambitious goals in areas like reducing greenhouse gas emissions, sustainably sourcing key ingredients, promoting recycling and responsible packaging, and even addressing those social issues related to human rights and labor standards in their supply chains.
So it sounds like they're thinking beyond just the bottom line and considering their impact on the planet and the communities they operate in.
They are. They've even partnered with the Fair Labor Association to assess and improve working conditions in their hazelnut supply chain in Turkey.
Wow, that's impressive. It shows they're not just talking about these issues, they're taking concrete actions to address them.
Exactly. And they're making strides in reducing their environmental footprint as well.
Yeah.
For instance, they've partnered with the Rainforest Alliance to promote sustainable cocoa farming practices and improve the livelihoods of cocoa farmers.
So those chocolate bars are not only delicious, they're also contributing to a better world. That's definitely something to feel good about.
It is. They're also working on reducing their packaging waste by exploring alternative materials like compostable packaging and increasing the use of recycled content in their packaging. They're even experimenting with refill stations for some of their products in select markets, encouraging consumers to reduce their single-use packaging.
That's fantastic. They're really trying to rethink every aspect of their operations through a sustainability lens.
They are. They're investing in renewable energy sources, like solar and wind power, to power their manufacturing facilities, implementing energy efficiency measures across their operations, and even working to reduce water usage in their production processes.
So it's not just about those finished products, it's about the entire journey, from farm to factory to consumer, right?
Precisely. They're looking at every step of that journey and finding ways to make it more sustainable and socially responsible.
It's inspiring to see a company of this scale making these kinds of commitments. It shows that sustainability and profitability can go hand in hand.
Absolutely. And they're not just doing this out of the goodness of their hearts. They recognize that these efforts are also good for business.
Right, attracting and retaining top talent, enhancing their brand reputation, appealing to those conscious consumers, and mitigating those risks associated with climate change and resource scarcity.
Exactly. It's a smart strategic move
Yeah.
that demonstrates their understanding of the evolving landscape of consumer expectations and the need to be a responsible corporate citizen in today's world.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. From those eye-popping financial figures to those inspiring sustainability initiatives, it's clear that Mondelez is a company on the move, constantly evolving and adapting to the changing world around them.
But even with all this progress, they still face some pretty substantial risks. We've touched on a few of them, but there are a couple more we need to explore that highlight the complex realities of operating a global snacking empire in today's world.
You've got my attention. Let's talk about those risks. What else are they grappling with?
Well, climate change is a major concern, especially for a company that relies so heavily on agricultural commodities. Droughts, floods, extreme weather events, these could disrupt those delicate supply chains, impacting everything from the availability and price of those key ingredients to the quality of those finished products.
It's a stark reminder of how interconnected we are with the natural world and how those environmental changes can have ripple effects across industries.
Absolutely. And then there's the ever-evolving landscape of consumer preferences. We've talked about this before, but it's worth emphasizing how crucial it is for Mondelez to stay ahead of those trends.
One minute, everyone's obsessed with low-carb snacks. The next, it's all about plant-based. Everything. It's enough to make your head spin faster than a chocolate chip cookie in a blender.
Exactly. And those preferences are increasingly influenced by ethical considerations. Consumers want transparency. They want to know where their food comes from, how it's produced, and whether the workers involved are treated fairly.
It's not just about what's in the snack anymore. It's about the story behind it. Consumers are voting with their wallets, supporting companies that align with their values.
And that's a trend that's only going to intensify in the coming years.
Yeah.
Mondelez understands this, and they're making efforts to address those ethical sourcing and ingredient transparency concerns. But it's an ongoing process that requires constant vigilance and adaptation.
Okay, so we've got climate change, those ever-shifting consumer preferences, and those ethical sourcing considerations. What other risks are they facing?
The report also highlights the potential impact of geopolitical instability on their global operations. Think trade wars, political unrest, those conflicts we've seen erupt in various parts of the world. These events can disrupt supply chains, impact currency exchange rates, and even create safety concerns for their employees and partners.
It's a sobering thought that even something as seemingly simple as a snack can get caught in the crosshairs of global events. It really underscores the complexity of operating on such a massive scale.
It does. And speaking of complexity, let's not forget about the ongoing challenge of attracting and retaining top talent. In today's competitive job market, companies have to work hard to attract and keep those skilled workers, especially in areas like technology, data analytics, and of course, sustainability.
Those are the fields that are going to be crucial for Mondelez's future success.
Exactly. They have to be competitive in terms of compensation, benefits, and even their company culture to attract and retain those top performers.
It's not just about snacks anymore. It's about creating a workplace that inspires people to do their best work and feel valued for their contributions.
Right. And let's not forget about the ever-changing landscape of regulations.
Oh, yes. Those ever-shifting rules and regulations can be a real headache for any global company. What kind of regulatory challenges are they facing?
They have to navigate labeling requirements, ingredient restrictions, marketing regulations, and food safety standards. And those rules can vary significantly from country to country.
It's like trying to solve a giant global jigsaw puzzle. with each piece representing a different set of regulations.
Exactly. It's a complex and ever-evolving landscape that requires constant attention and adaptation.
Okay, so we've explored those risks, but let's end on a more optimistic note. What are the potential rewards for Mondelez if they can successfully navigate these challenges and capitalize on the opportunities we discuss?
Well, the upside is pretty significant. They have the potential to solidify their position as the undisputed global leader in snacking. They've got the brand recognition, the distribution networks, and the resources to capture an even larger share of that global snacking market.
World domination, but with cookies and chocolate.
Precisely. And they're strategically positioned to ride the wave of growth in those emerging markets, tapping into those expanding consumer bases and tailoring their products to those diverse cultural preferences.
And let's not forget about their efforts to embrace those healthier and more sustainable options, responding to those evolving consumer demands and positioning themselves as a leader in those areas.
Those initiatives are not only good for the planet and for consumers, but they're also good for business, enhancing their brand reputation, attracting talent, and mitigating those risks associated with climate change and resource scarcity.
It's a smart, holistic approach that recognizes the interconnectedness of business, society, and the environment.
And it all comes down to innovation. Their Willy Wonka-esque technical centers are constantly experimenting, pushing boundaries, and finding new ways to delight our taste buds, while also addressing those evolving consumer needs.
So they're keeping those snack shelves exciting, enticing, and hopefully a little bit more sustainable and responsible.
Exactly. It's a bold and ambitious vision, and it will be fascinating to see how it unfolds in the coming years. The future of snacking is being shaped right now, and Mondelez is playing a key role in that transformation.
Now let's turn our attention back to that human element. We talked about their workforce earlier, but I'm curious to learn more about how Mondelez views its employees and the steps they're taking to create a positive and inclusive work environment.
That's a great question. After all, you can have the best snacks in the world. But without a dedicated and talented workforce, those snacks aren't going to magically appear on store shelves.
Exactly. It's the people who make it all happen. So what's their approach to human capital management?
Well, they highlight in their report that they recognize their employees as their most valuable asset. They emphasize their commitment to creating a work environment where employees feel valued, respected, and empowered to contribute their best.
So it's not just about churning out those snacks. It's about cultivating a company culture that attracts and retains top talent.
Absolutely. They're focusing on initiatives to promote diversity, equity, and inclusion, fostering a sense of belonging among their 91,000 employees worldwide. They even have a dedicated Global Diversity and Inclusion Council that sets the strategic direction for these initiatives.
That's impressive. It shows they're committed to building a truly inclusive workplace where everyone has the opportunity to thrive.
And they're not just focusing on diversity within their own walls. Remember, their efforts to ensure fair labor practices throughout their supply chains. That's part of their commitment to treating everyone with respect and dignity. From those cocoa farmers to the factory workers, to the folks stocking those supermarket shelves.
It's about creating a more just and equitable snacking industry, not just within their own company, but across their entire supply chain. That's a powerful message.
It is. And they're also investing in employee development programs, providing opportunities for growth and advancement within the company. They offer training programs, mentoring opportunities, and even tuition reimbursement to help their employees develop their skills and advance their careers.
It's about recognizing that their employees are not just cogs in a machine. They're individuals with aspirations and potential. And by investing in their development, they're creating a more engaged and productive workforce.
Exactly. And it's not just about those tangible benefits. It's also about creating a culture where people feel valued and appreciated. They have employee resource groups, volunteer programs, and other initiatives to foster a sense of community and belonging among their workforce.
It's about creating a workplace where people feel connected to something bigger than themselves, a company that shares their values and supports their growth.
Exactly. And I think that's what makes Mondelez so interesting. They're not just focused on selling snacks. They're striving to be a force for good in the world, whether it's through their sustainability initiatives, their commitment to diversity and inclusion, or their efforts to create a positive work environment for their employees.
It's a refreshing approach, and it's clear they're putting a lot of thought and effort into these initiatives.
They are. And it'll be interesting to see how these efforts evolve in the coming years and what kind of impact they have on the company, the industry, and the world.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. We've explored their global operations, their financial performance, their sustainability initiatives, and even delved into their approach to human capital management. But before we wrap up, I want to circle back to those risk factors outlined in their annual report. We touched on a few, but there are a couple more worth revisiting.
You're right. Some of those risks highlight the unique challenges of operating a global snacking empire in today's complex and interconnected world.
Let's talk about those challenges. What else is keeping those Mondelez executives up at night?
One major concern is cybersecurity. You mentioned the NotPetya incident earlier, and that's just one example of the ever-present threat of cyber attacks. In today's digital world, companies like Mondelez are constantly targeted by hackers seeking to steal data, disrupt operations, or even hold their systems hostage for ransom.
It's a constant game of cat and mouse, with those cyber criminals becoming more sophisticated by the day.
Exactly. Mondelez has invested heavily in cybersecurity, but it's a constant battle to stay ahead of those threats.
And what about those regulatory changes we touched on earlier? How are those impacting their business?
They have to stay on top of those ever-evolving rules and regulations related to food safety, labeling, ingredients, marketing practices. It's a complex and constantly shifting landscape, and even a small misstep can result in fines, lawsuits, or damage to their reputation.
It's like trying to hit a moving target while juggling a bunch of snacks.
Exactly. It requires constant vigilance and a deep understanding of the regulatory environment in each of the markets they operate in.
So they've got those cybersecurity threats, those regulatory hurdles, and of course those external forces like climate change and geopolitical instability that can disrupt their operations at any moment.
Right. And let's not forget about the constant pressure to innovate and stay ahead of those ever-shifting consumer preferences.
It's a lot to juggle. But despite all these challenges, they seem to be navigating these complexities quite well. They've been around for over a century, weathering countless storms and emerging as a global powerhouse in the snacking industry.
They've demonstrated a remarkable ability to adapt, innovate, and evolve to meet those changing demands and challenges. And that's what makes them so fascinating to study. They're not just selling snacks. They're a microcosm of the globalized world, reflecting the complexities of business, society, and the environment in the 21st century.
Well said. So as we wrap up this deep dive into Mondelez International, I want to pose one final question to you, our expert snacking analyst. Given everything we've learned, what's your prediction for their future? Will they continue to reign supreme in the snack aisle, or will they crumble under the pressure of those ever-evolving consumer demands and those global challenges?
That's the million-dollar question. And like any good snack, it's a mix of sweet and salty with a hint of the unknown.
Oh, I like that analogy. So what's your flavor forecast?
Well, based on our deep dive into their annual report, I'd say they're well-positioned for continued success. They've got a strong foundation with those iconic brands, a global reach, and a solid financial performance, despite those headwinds we discussed.
But they're not resting on their laurels, right?
Absolutely not. They're actively adapting to those evolving consumer preferences, expanding their portfolio to include those healthier and more sustainable options. And they're investing heavily in innovation, constantly seeking new ways to delight our taste buds.
So they're keeping those snack shelves exciting, enticing, and hopefully a little bit more sustainable and responsible.
Exactly. And they're doing it all while striving to be a more responsible corporate citizen. Addressing those crucial environmental and social issues, they're not just selling snacks anymore. They're trying to make a positive impact on the world.
And that's a trend we're seeing across industries. Consumers are demanding more from the companies they support, and those companies that are listening and responding are the ones that will thrive in the long run.
Absolutely. It's no longer enough to just make a profit. Companies need to have a purpose, a mission that goes beyond the bottom line. And Mondelez seems to understand that.
Well, I'm inspired by their efforts.
Yeah.
And I'm definitely going to be paying closer attention to those snack labels from now on. But for now, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive.
Agreed. We've certainly devoured a lot of information today.
A huge thank you to you, our expert guide, for helping us unpack the complexities of this snacking giant.
It's been my pleasure. Always happy to delve into the world of snacks and sustainability.
And to our listeners, we hope you found this deep dive both informative and, dare we say, deliciously insightful. We encourage you to continue exploring the world of snacking and consider the impact of your everyday choices on your health, the environment, and the communities we all share.
Until next time, happy snacking.
All right, so we've journeyed through Mondelez's financials, their global reach, and their push for sustainable snacking. But before we wrap up, let's circle back to those risks they outlined in their annual report. We touched on a few, but there are a couple more that really highlight the tightrope they're walking in today's world.
Yeah, you're right. Some of these risks are pretty significant, especially in today's rapidly changing landscape.
For instance, they talk about the potential impact of climate change, something we all hear about, but it can feel a bit abstract until you think about how it directly affects those everyday snacks we take for granted.
It's a very real concern for a company so reliant on agricultural commodities, cocoa, wheat, sugar. Climate change can disrupt those delicate supply chains, leading to price swings, shortages, even impacting the quality of the ingredients.
So that chocolate bar you love, it could become pricier, harder to find, or even taste different thanks to those, shifting weather patterns.
Exactly. And we're not just talking gradual changes here. Extreme weather events, they can damage crops, disrupt transport, creating this ripple effect across the whole industry.
Makes you realize we're all connected to those global systems, doesn't it? Even those seemingly distant environmental shifts, they can impact what we see on our local grocery shelves.
Absolutely. And then, of course, there's the constant evolution of consumer preferences. We've talked about this, but it bears repeating. Mondelez has to stay ahead of those trends or they'll get left behind.
One minute it's low-fat everything, next minute everyone's going plant-based. It's enough to make your head spin faster than a cookie in a blender.
Exactly. And those preferences, they're increasingly tied to ethical considerations. Consumers want transparency. They want to know where their food's coming from, how it was produced, were workers treated fairly.
It's not just what's in the snack anymore. It's the whole story behind it. Consumers are putting their money where their values are.
And that trend's only getting stronger. Mondelez seems to get this. They're working on that ethical sourcing, that ingredient transparency. But it's an ongoing process. Vigilance is key. They can't just check a box and call it a day. This has to be built into how they operate, every decision they make.
You're right. It's got to be a commitment, not just a one-time PR move.
Precisely. And it's not even just about reacting to pressure. It's anticipating what's coming next, positioning themselves as the leader in sustainable, responsible snacking.
So they've got to be thinking years ahead. What'll consumers want? How to meet those needs while being profitable and indeed living up to their values.
You got it. Finding that sweet spot, purpose and profit. Doing well by doing good.
I like that. So as we wrap up this deep dive into Mondelez, a final question for you, their snacking expert. Given all we've uncovered, what's your prediction? Will they hold on to that snack aisle crown, or will they crumble under the pressure of all these demands, all these global challenges?
The million-dollar question.
Yeah.
And like a good snack, it's a bit sweet, a bit salty, with a dash of the unknown, wouldn't you say?
Haha, I love that analogy. So what's the flavor forecast looking like?
Well, based on what we've seen in this report, I'd say they're in a pretty good spot. Strong foundation, those iconic brands,
Yeah.
global reach, solid financials, even with those bumps in the road.
But it's not just about the numbers, right?
No, definitely not. It's their willingness to adapt, to innovate, to really engage with these bigger questions of sustainability, social responsibility, ethical practices.
They're not shying away from the tough stuff, actively seeking solutions, even if they're still, figuring it all out.
Exactly. That willingness to learn, to try new things, to be open about the process, that's what gives me hope, honestly.
It's inspiring to see a company this size taking these things seriously, making a real effort to be a force for good.
It is.
Yeah.
And it reminds us, we as consumers have power too. Supporting companies that align with what we believe in, that pushes for positive change, it can create a more sustainable, more equitable, and let's be honest, more delicious future for everyone.
Could have said it better myself. Well, I think that's a fantastic note to end on. A huge thank you to you, our expert, for guiding us through the world of Mondelez.
Always a pleasure. Happy to talk snacks and sustainability any day.
And to all our listeners, we hope you found this deep dive insightful and, dare I say, deliciously informative. Keep exploring these issues, ask those tough questions, and make those conscious choices that build a better world.
Happy snacking, everyone.
And happy learning.